G'day and welcome to Insights and Storytellings with me, Moon Willow. As always, it's a real honour and privilege to have you join with me and contribute your energies as I do these storytellings and try and untangle the mess that is, from my perspective, the world that we're living in at the moment. I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to talk about today, which happens on a regular basis, to be fair. But my sense today is very much around sort of like the lack of movement, harvesting and signals. And to be honest, I got them from the runestones, I have to say. So I use different ways to tune in, and I like consulting runestones from time to time, less often these days than normal, and I used to. So it is very much, I think the runes are speaking quite honestly at the moment, because we have got that sheer lack of movement at the minute. We are very restricted, especially in the United Kingdom. But on a lot of levels, there is this real still sense of that oppressive feel going off, that we can't be who we want to be. Does that make sense? I hope so. But it's like we keep hitting brick walls. It's difficult to really navigate forward with any degree of certainty and speed at the moment. But the next rune was harvest, and it's a reminder that when we're putting in a field, a crop to grow food, that takes nurture, that takes a lot of nourishing, watering, sunshine, and it takes time. So there does seem to be a lack of movement on the surface, but there is still an incredible amount of movement underneath. And I think that's the same for us, that although we may have an idea of how we want to move, where we want to move to, where we're aiming for, there are restrictions on a huge level that are preventing us from doing that. But if we change the thought in our head so that it isn't restrictive, but actually it is about the germination process and that growing process, that we're heading towards a harvest, that it is really important at the minute to really nurture ourselves, look after ourselves properly, ground into earth and connect up into source, feed ourselves properly as well. And it's not just food, it's feeding our souls, nurturing our souls through taking time out and, as I say, connecting to earth underneath us. And making sure that we are nurturing our emotional health as well, and being careful of the diet that we take in regards to what we're watching, what we're reading, ensuring that we're sort of not becoming overwhelmed with all the information coming in, that the information that we are observing or researching is about sort of uncovering a truth, but being aware of how that makes us feel, if that's sort of producing responses like fear or stress or anxiety, that actually it might be an idea to put that down for a bit and start reading things or listening to things that actually bring us joy and fulfillment, happiness, contentment. So really being aware of all of what we're putting into our bodies, not just on a physical level, as I say, but on emotional, spiritual levels as well. And then the last rune was signals. So in that quiet contemplation, just before we harvest a new world, a new source of energy, and that's coming from sort of like the higher vibration, that we are present in that now moment, so that we notice when signals come through, when we notice the synchronicities, that keeping in our flow and really sort of trusting the universe as well. But trusting ourselves in the universe is really important. And as I've been saying past couple of readings, it's just very important to sort of sit with that flow and notice when you're coming up against resistance, so that see that as not a block to be fought against, but actually taking a time to sit back and work out how to reroute. Really notice the space and the time where things feel easier, that the synchronicities are coming in, and walk more in that way, and really resonate with that energy that's coming in as well. I'm hoping this makes sense. We'll see which crystal and which chakra would like to be heard today. So trusty crystal bag. That one came through. So we've got carnelian today, and our sacral space. So very much our creative space and creating the world that we're living in. So in that lack of movement, it's about also looking at, so we're going to be harvesting, or it's reaping what we sow. So that works really well with the sacral space, that we are on one level, when we're witnessing or looking at different information coming in, we start to really vibrate and listen to our gut response to that, and that gut response comes from the sacral space. And notice the emotional responses we have to it, and not attribute, assign it a particular space of that's good, that's bad, but just be curious around it. Oh, that's interesting. What's that trying to tell me? How can I change that? How can I utilize that information to move forward? How do I, if it's something that feels negative, or you've got the fear and the anxiety going into it, it's like having a look at where that comes from, rerouting, changing directions. If it feels bad, don't do it, basically. There are times, and I really know this at the moment, that we invariably end up doing things that we don't feel comfortable doing, that but the outcome of not doing it feels worse than actually doing it. But within that, sort of really having an understanding as to why you're walking in a certain way, or choosing to do something, so that it actually fits fully for yourself. Because if you haven't done that, that has a habit of tripping us up, I find, and can bring about a darker space. But if you have a full understanding as to why, and I mean, for me, that's sort of going to work at the minute, having that full understanding as to why that's needful, it can be actually alchemized and changed into something different, so that it's you have less of a resistance around it and an easier flow, and looking at the benefits of actually doing that particular thing that feels not quite right, not quite comfortable. And then the other side of the sacral creativity is, as I was saying, is sort of having a look at the level of nourishment you're giving yourself, and it's noticing sort of if you're reading too much or watching too much of a specific narrative, or having a specific energetic undercurrent that is pulling you down, then actually turning that off and choosing something different that lifts your soul. So whether that be the walking or creating good food for yourself, listening to music, dancing, singing, drawing, reading books that have nothing to do with anything other than bringing you enjoyment. So really having a look at your creative space. What is it that you're creating? Are you creating blocks and resistance, or are you allowing that to alchemize and become that creative, magical, synchronistic flow, which I feel is what we're looking at trying to achieve. So on that note, I'll see which cards come out and what more information or storytelling we can take that through. Whoop. Oop, and there's the third. They have different ways that they like to come out from time to time. Okay. So the three cards are the stork, the star, and the heart. So the stork is new beginnings, which works so well with the sacral chakra, because it's in that creativity, it's in that energy flow that we can create our new beginnings, our new worlds, the way we'd like to live. And the energy, and where do we want to focus our energy? Do we want to continue focusing into places that don't feel good, that bring us hurt, discomfort, fear, anxiety? Or are we wanting or trying to create a space and an environment that is actually nurturing and loving and higher vibrational, interconnected, but maintaining our own sense of self through that? So the first card with the stork is that new beginnings, that it also links into the movement or lack of movement rune as well. It's like taking stock, instead of getting frustrated that we don't seem to be moving as quickly as we may have been told or we perceived was going to happen. Actually really sitting into our sacral space and really feeling what it is we would like to bring into fruition. What is the sort of world we'd like to live in, and actually have that as our new beginning? How do we create that? What sort of relationships are we having with the world when we sort of go for a walk or pay attention to other human beings, birds, four-leggeds, the world around us? And how do we fit in that? Is that harmonious, or is that sticky? Does that hurt? And really feel into what you'd like to bring more of into your world, and how it sort of really feel into your sacral space as to how that can become a new beginning. How do we create the changes of how our energy feels? And it's not disregarding if we're feeling down or low or whatever, but sort of noticing that that's come in, and it may be that it's situations beyond our control that's sort of contributing to that, but we have the ability to bring into our lives different things that can actually change that energy and help us lift ourselves out of that and alchemize the underlying negative energy into something more positive. And for me, that's just a really good new beginning, a new start. And we're already walking that higher frequency, but because there are so many similarities to what we've already experienced through 2020 that can actually sort of draw us back into, well, here we go again, we didn't get out of it, nothing happened that we were promised. But actually, we're different. The way that we're walking, the way that we're moving is different, and it's remembering that and holding that. The situations around us may not be different, but we are. And it's coming back to, as I've been saying as well, is really anchoring into ourselves. And that brings me into the next card, which is the star. Recognizing that we are the star of our own story, and we are the writers, we are the creators of our stories, and co-creators as well. I mean, we don't do this in isolation, even though we are responsible for our own perceptions in our own world and how we actually walk through it, which is where the star comes in. But it's ensuring that our anchor point is within us. That we're not, as I have been saying, that we're not dependent on other people's goodwill or good mood to actually feel good about ourselves, that we can actually do that independently. We have the ability to do that, and really sitting in our creative space and understanding our emotional flows and responses to everything that's going around. We can then choose which vibration we actually stay in, and it's like we can choose a piece of music that will actually end up making us feel more melancholy or more sad or more angry or more fearful. But equally, we can choose music that will lift up our mood, that can actually help us feel happier, that actually help us feel more connected and love. And in that same vein, we can actually choose which parts of the world around us that we actually pay attention to and actually tune into, to bring more of that to come in. And that's where sort of really holding and focusing on the synchronistic flow, because we all have it. It's just that if we've got the conditioning in there already that we're looking for the negative, that's what we're going to keep noticing. But if we reprogram or dial into sort of like joy and magical experiences and things working well, noticing the times when things do fit, things do flow through without actually realizing, taking a minute and really looking at that and focusing in on that and focusing on that sort of next step, as it were. But again, it's anchoring into ourselves. It's really anchoring into earth underneath, allowing her to give us extra energy to move forward and alchemize any sort of residual garbage, because we have the power to do that. We truly do. So the star is that recognizing that we are the ones that are writing our own stories, and we are able to write more good parts for us. We are able to write better experiences, to have more joyful experiences. And as I say, it's not to disregard the others, because that's when we trip ourselves up. It's just allowing that to be alchemized, to be changed, to be integrated, so we can actually flow better and keep flowing. Which brings me to the last card for today, which is the heart. So it is really connecting into our heart space, and really doing everything from that unconditional love, loving perspective, but having an idea of what it is our hearts truly desire. Do we desire having more pain? Do we desire having more anxiety? Because there might be an underlying plot line that we hadn't realised or haven't dealt with, that actually wants to keep creating that and bringing that into our lives. Now, if we look at it from an external perspective, or a disconnected perspective, we could turn around and say, well, why would I want to bring that in? But it's almost like there's an unfinished business, or we haven't quite merged that properly within. And that's actually what ends up being put out into the universe, which is what comes back. And that's again sort of, if we're focusing on the negative, that's going to bring more negative in. But unless we actually integrate all of our heart space and really have a sense of what it is that our hearts truly desire, and having a look at why, where does that come from, having that real clear clarity, that we can actually start sifting through and requesting to have more joy, to have more love, to have more understanding, to have more care about ourselves, and again doing that from a very compassionate point of view, and really getting into the nitty-gritty and the underlying storylines that we may not have heard or may not have noticed because they're too painful, or we may have this oh no, not again, why have I done this to myself again? It has that sort of negative underlying undertones, but we do tend to want to dismiss them, or not acknowledge that they exist. And if that happens, then they have more of a propensity to come back in. It's almost like, no, you will notice that I exist. I am going to keep showing and showing this until you integrate it and manage to move it through. So really, really getting a sense of what it is your heart truly desires. And one of the ways that I do that was presented to me by a friend was, if you had £1 million, what would you actually do? And it's, would you do that? As if money was no object, if energy was no object, what is it that you would truly want to do? And it gives that freedom. But it's also noticing that there may be times when you truly don't know, and that's okay. It's going back and looking at it again, and sort of really, as I've been saying on other ones, just taking a couple of steps down a path and see whether that feels right, see whether that brings joy to your heart, whether your gut is actually joyful or is it cringing. But it's remembering to take time to really look at that and really feel that, feel into it, because we do create our lives to be very, very busy. So that we have no time and space to notice which ones we're tuning into, what are we tuning into, what are we bringing in, and we don't always give our sacral space a chance to be heard. What is the emotional response to this? Why is that particular emotional response there? What can I do about it? How can I change that? Or is it exactly what I wanted? So really getting more of a sense of ourselves. So lack of movement sounds quite stagnating and sort of being stuck. But actually, if you look at it with the Stork card, it's about really having that new beginnings. It's that utilising the time to really have a look in and see what it is that you would like to actually harvest into your life. What do you want to bring in? What are you actually sowing? What seeds are you putting out there to come back in? Which is, what is it that you would like your new life to look like? Your new, well, it doesn't even have to be new, it's just the addition to the life you've got, but that higher frequency and that movement into something that brings you joy, and remembering from the star perspective. And the harvest card is that what it is we're putting in there is what we harvest, but remembering that we are the writers, we are the stars of our own production. That's not to exclude other people, but it's actually realizing we have that responsibility, and that is again about putting that anchor back into ourselves and into the earth underneath us, so that we're taking that responsibility. But as I was saying, it's not how we handle things is not dependent on somebody else. How we feel isn't dependent on somebody else. It's entirely us. It's entirely our relationship with ourselves. and to get a clearer understanding, that is really looking into our heart space and really getting a sense of what it is our hearts desire the most, and how we remain true to that from a compassionate and unconditional loving point of view and perspective. So I'm hoping this is making sense to people listening in. I'm going to see which sound comes through now for our hearts. I recognised I said hearts, and this is actually for the sacral, but I feel within this story that the two are greatly interlinked, and it's the emotional responses from the gut and how we create it through understanding what it is our hearts truly desire, and having a full open space to look at both, that actually works in together. So anyway, thank you very much for joining me. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. I do individual storytellings as well, and the information will be in the description box. In the meantime, with a bit of luck, I'll be back on board tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Love you all. Bye for now.